What's going on, guys? Today I have a decklist video for you with Lost March. Lost March is a deck that has not gotten a lot of attention, been hyped here and there, but has generally not seen much play. I feel like I've come up with a pretty good list for it, and I'd love to show it to you guys. So let's just jump right into it. First off, we have 4 copies of our main attacker, Jumpluff. Jumpluff has the spectacular Lost March attack that, and it does 20 damage for each of your Pokemon, except for Prism Star Pokemon, into the Lost Zone. More on how we're going to get our Pokemon in there in just a second. We have 4 copies of each Skiploom and Hoppip, although Skiploom has a very special ability that really helps this deck, which is Floral Path to the Sky. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for a Jumpluff, put this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into the Lost Zone, and then put the Jumpluff in its place. Then you shuffle your deck. This is really good because it puts your Pokemon into the Lost Zone to fuel Jumpluff's attack, and it basically turns Jumpluff into a Stage 1 Pokemon, meaning you could potentially get a Lost March for over 100 damage on your second turn, which is really good coming from a 1-prize card attacker. There are so many benefits to being a 1-prize card attacker, and we'll get to those in a minute. We have 4 copies of Hoppip from Lost Thunder. We're using the 40 HP one simply because it's better than 30 HP, as there are some things that can hit 30 but not 40. Next, we have 4 copies of Trumbeak. Trumbeak is a great Pokemon with an ability that helps you get Pokemon into the Lost Zone. Mountain Pass. It says, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in your hand, you can reveal it, and if you do, look at the top card of your opponent's deck and put this Pokemon into the Lost Zone. If that card is a supporter card, you may put it in their Lost Zone. If your opponent has no cards in your deck, you can't use this ability. So, basically, not only can that help for disruption, be really good for potentially getting the opponent's Welders into the discard pile, but of course it gets your own Pokemon into the discard, get that extra 20, 40, or even potentially 60, depending on how many you have in hand, damage onto the opponent's Pokemon to get a knockout. Another great thing about this deck is that it can hit huge numbers with Jumpluff. Generally, in a game, you can get almost guaranteed 12 or 13 Pokemon, sometimes even 14, if you draw well, which is enough to KO most major Pokemon in the game, like Arceus, Dialga, Palkia, Reshiram, and Charizard, and Mewtwo and Mew. Next up, we have 4 copies of Jirachi with the Stellar Wish ability, one of the most popular Pokemon in the game, because once during your turn, you can put it asleep, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and pick out a trainer card you find there. After that, you put it in your hand, and although Jirachi's asleep, we have ways to get out of that, and even so, you can use Stellar Wish again if Jirachi stays asleep. Next, we have another Pokemon that can use Lost March, 2 copies of Whimsicott. The reason we're not playing more, or even instead of Jumpluff, is because not only does its previous form, Cottony, not have any way to put itself into the Lost Zone, but we also need to use a triple acceleration energy instead of just a grass to use Lost March. But although Whimsicott is still good, we can use triple acceleration energy for it, so it's a good alternate attacker. Additionally, it hits weakness on Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia, which is a troublesome matchup as they take extra prize cards. We have 3 copies of Cottony. It also has the Lost March attack, but as it is for 2 colorless energy, we're not going to be using it quite as much. Oricorio GX, which we have 2 copies of, is our last Pokemon, with the Dance of Tribute ability. Although you can technically use Razor Wing or Strafe GX in this deck, you probably aren't going to want to. Dance of Tribute is extremely good in non-GX decks, as you can potentially drop to 15 additional cards using it. The reason we have 2 instead of 1, even though you can only use 1 Dance of Tribute per turn, is for prizing issues, consistency issues, and just in case they manage to knock one out. That's our Pokemon count for this deck. On to the trainer cards, starting with supporters. We have 4 copies of Professor Elm's Lecture. These are super important, as you're going to be able to search your deck for 3 Pokemon with 60 HP or less, which is a lot of stuff in your deck, being Hoppip, Skiploom, and Cottony. Additionally, you can search them out, then use Pokemon Communication to shuffle them back in and get a different Pokemon you need. This is great because if you can get 2 of them on your first 2 turns, you can get 3 Hoppip, then 3 Skip Bloom, meaning that you'll get at least 6 Pokemon in your Lost Zone and 3 Jumpluff on your second turn, unless you have some serious pricing issues. We have 4 more supporter cards, 2 of them being Rosa. Rosa is extremely good in 1-prize decks, just like Oricorio, because if one of your Pokemon was knocked out on the last turn, you can search your deck for a Pokemon, a trainer, and a basic energy. That's really good to help you come back, potentially find that extra Lost Blender or Pokemon communication you need, and it can get it for you. And additionally, it gets you another Trumbeak, another Skiploom, Hoppip, Jirachi, basically anything you need. It's also really good because it's hard to search out Whimsicots, except for Pokemon communication, and just having a good way to get that out is usually really helpful. Lastly, we have 2 copies of good old Cynthia. Shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 6 cards, just an extra consistency card, as this is a 1-prize card deck without a super serious engine, especially in the early game, so it's good to just have Cynthia if we can't fight our Elms Lecture. Onto the item cards. We have 4 copies of Pokemon Communication. Put a Pokemon from your hand into your deck, and then get a new Pokemon, which is awesome, considering that we don't have much search for Whimsicott, Jirachi, and Oricorio GX. So this is really our main way to get them out. We have 4 copies of Lost Blender, another way we can get Pokemon, such as Cottony, Oricorio GX, and Jirachi into the Lost Zone. It's put 2 cards from your hand into the Lost Zone, and then draw a card. Drawing that card is usually pretty good, as it can give you an extra card to work with, just in case. But its main purpose is getting 2 Pokemon into the Lost Zone that you normally wouldn't be able to. You'll generally want a Lost Zone, 1 Cottony, if they don't knock out an Oricorio, probably one of your Oricorios, and then 2 Jirachis with those Lost Blenders. We have 2 copies of Netball. Search your deck for a basic grass Pokemon like Hoppip, and a basic grass energy. And that's just really good for consistency. In case you missed the first turn Elm, you can potentially start Hoppip, Netball for another Hoppip, and then Pokemon Communication for a third Hoppip. Totally up to you. We have 2 copies of Great Catcher, just for bringing up a big tag team or a big GX, and knocking it out with a huge Lost March attack, early or late in the game. We have 1 copy of Switch. The reason we're not playing more is it's mainly just for the Jirachi engine, and Whimsicott, Skiploom, and Jumpluff all have free retreat, and with an escape board, Jirachi and Oricorio do too. Nothing in this deck has more than a retreat cost of 1, although Absol can be kind of troublesome. We do have one copy of Reset Stamp, just as a little bit of extra disruption, as we can fall apart at the end of the game if they've taken too many prize cards and our Dances of Tribute aren't quite working out. We have 2 copies of Escape Board to get our Jirachi out of the active spot after it's asleep, because it allows you to retreat when a Pokemon is asleep or paralyzed, and reduces it by 1, perfect for Jirachi, as it gives it free retreat, and it can retreat when it's asleep. Our last trainer card is 1 copy of Chaotic Swell. This is a super packed deck list, and there really isn't much space to add anything else, as we need to play a super high Pokemon count to make sure we can always hit our Lost Blenders, as well as have our Jumpluff line. But just having a 1 of Chaotic Swell really works as 2 counter stadiums, because you counter a first stadium, then they play another one, and are forced to discard it along with Chaotic Swell, as something like Power Plant sticking can be super dangerous. We play 3 copies of Triple Acceleration Energy to attack with Whimsicott. The reason this is so good is because, generally, since Whimsicott has such low HP, it'll be getting knocked out on the next turn of the game, which would be your opponent's turn after attacking anyways, and it only gives up 1 prize card, which is great. And it can let you use Whimsicott's attack for just 1 attachment instead of the 2 that you would normally need. There are other means of accelerating this energy you could use, such as Welder or Mina, or potentially even Tapu Koko or Prism Star, but I feel that this is the best way, especially just because it's 1 attachment, and if it's getting knocked out anyways, you may as well just use it. 2 copies of Rainbow Energy are next. The reason we play 2 Rainbow instead of a higher count of grass energy is because we can potentially use Whimsicott's first attack, which, although it doesn't do any damage, it allows you to put a card from your hand into the Lost Zone, hopefully a Pokemon, and then you get to draw 3 cards, which is useful if you're in a bad position, or if they knock out a Whimsicott, and you just don't have any other options. To end off the deck, we have 3 copies of Grass Energy. Grass Energy is just great because you attack with Jump Love. It's just energy. And it's also searchable with Netball. Otherwise, if we didn't have Netball, it would probably just be 4 Rainbow. But since we do have Netball, yeah. Now, a couple cards I would like to be able to fit into this deck are Guzman-Hala. Guzman-Hala is one of the best cards that we can use for this deck because we play Tools, Special Energy, and only 1 Stadium card. Although I'm not quite sure what I would cut for it. If you have any suggestions, please do leave them in the comments below. I really would like to change this deck up and add a couple cards. I'd like to add at least 2 copies of Guzman-Hala. I may want to try and fit in another copy of Rosa, potentially. Or probably another Chaotic Swell too, just to deal with trickier matchups that play a lot of power plants. That's about it for the deck list. A little bit about matchups. You should hopefully have a decent ADP matchup, even if they get their GX attack off, because you hit weakness on both Keldeo and ADP with different attackers, although Oricorio is not quite as useful. Ability Zard, it's a bit of a 50-50 matchup, as they have plenty of non-GX attacking options, but if they start something like Reshiram and Charizard, or Mega Lopunny and Jigglypuff, you can knock it out, get ahead in the prize race, hopefully have some extra resources, and then be able to take the game from there. Against Baby Blacephalon, it's kind of an awkward matchup. You just have to stay 1 step ahead and hope they don't draw everything. Against Malamar is probably your worst matchup if they set up. You just have to hope they don't set up, either that or just be aggressive, as Giratina is just going to be able to spread damage, and you just need to play carefully. Against most tag team decks that aren't Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia, it should be pretty straightforward, especially Green's decks. You really just have to pile up the Pokemon in your Lost Zone, and eventually take a knockout. Like Gardevoir and Sylveon, for example, or even Green Zard. Against some of the decks like Garchomp and Giratina, same strategy would apply. You just have to be a little bit careful of their tricks, like sniping 40 on the bench to knock out a Cottony or a Hoppip. That's about gonna wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please consider subscribing and liking this video. Appreciate it so much. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.